In this lesson we're going to be learning how to do vibrato, of which there'll be 4 types. Now vibrato is very difficult to do, but it really does add a nice touch to your phrases when you're soloing. Let's take a look now. The first vibrato we'll do will be with the first finger at the 5th fret on the 3rd string. Again, if you notice, I've got my thumb over the neck because, as I mentioned earlier, we need to be able to twist and rotate our wrist to produce the proper vibrato sound. Just a word to mention that in classical guitar, and indeed on the violin, people do a vibrato this way. Now, we don't do this with the electric guitar. We actually place our finger here, thumb over the neck, and we pull slightly away with our wrist. And it produces a lovely singing tone, as opposed to just a plain, straight note. Now, one thing to bear in mind is you want to imagine that your finger, the palm of your hand and your thumb are almost one big welded piece of architecture that simply stays in place. You may want to think about touching the edge of the neck with your finger here, and have your finger again on a diagonal angle. If you're too parallel, it's rather awkward to get the vibrato action to take place. So we'll touch the edge of the neck with our finger, about where our finger and the palm of our hand join. We'll place our first finger, curl it over, bend it nicely, fingertip on top of the string, just behind the fret, thumb over the edge of the neck, and by simply almost waving the hand evenly and back, try not to jerk it like this, but actually move it very slowly back and forth. You will pull the string with your fingertip just ever so slightly out of tune and back in tune again, creating the vibrato effect. Again. Now, as you get used to doing this action, you may find that you can play fast vibratos, which of course sound very effective at the end of a phrase. But a lot of times, a slow vibrato that is quite wide, that is the wave of the note in terms of its sound, is wider and slower than a little fast one, like that. So try and develop a nice, slow, even, wide vibrato. And you may find that when you start doing vibrato, you may only get a few nice little wavers like that, and then the remaining ones kind of hand wobbles all over the place. Don't be discouraged by that. Start out with just even one pulling down on the string and back, and then increase that to 2, and then 3 and 4, and so on and so forth, until you get a nice smooth vibrato taking place for as long as the note is sustaining. One more time. Now let's look at another vibrato. We'll set our fingers up like we did with a bend, 3rd finger on a diagonal, thumb over, middle squash, first in, and we'll play the note, but instead of bending upwards by rotating, we just slightly rotate and nudge the string out of tune in an upward motion. So we're really just going up and back, very, very slightly. As we increase the speed of that action, we can hear the vibrato emerge in the sound. That's slow and wide. And that would be a quicker vibrato speed. Again, do notice my little finger is not under the neck. Always watch out for that, won't you? Now, if you can do this one, you can try tackling probably the hardest vibrato of all, which is a bend vibrato. Consider for a second, you've got to not only hold the note up, rotate it up and keep it in pitch, but you have to twist your wrist back and forth and not lose the pitch of the string that you're bending. This is very difficult, but it sounds like this. And the best way to approach this is to start out with a plain bend and hold. When you're satisfied that you're in the correct pitch, drop the string down by rotating your fingers downwards ever so slightly and push it back in tune again. So we bend up, let it ring a bit, drop it down and back in tune. Most people exaggerate the drop down. They often go... Now we don't want to do that. It has to be a very subtle drop in pitch, almost a microtone. If it's too far down, it really doesn't sound as effective. Let's try it again. So we bend up, drop it down, back in pitch. And again, like the other method where we only started with one pull of the string, we'll drop down once and back in tune again. Increase that to 2, 3, 4, 5 wavering tones of vibrato until the note dies away. I think most guitarists would agree that one of the hardest things to do is vibrato. You have to practice this all the time on a daily basis until you get really good at it. And even then, don't be too concerned if it takes you a month or half a year to get this thing happening properly. Anyway, we'll look at one more type of vibrato. This is what I call a vertical vibrato because of the angle of the finger. I'm now with my third finger at the 7th fret on the 3rd string. Now to do this vibrato, you require the finger to be parallel, in this case, to the fret, like that, not on the diagonal that we used earlier, but parallel, raised up so the angle is vertical to the fingerboard, right there. And you find a funny kind of balancing point if you're vertical. Your finger will bend, as it is here, and then you play the note, and with your finger only, not with any wrist action, you pull the string down and back. It's almost easier if you do it quickly. It doesn't really lend itself to one of these slow, wide vibratos. Again. And a lot of times you can precede this vertical vibrato with a technique called a hammer-on. Now, a hammer-on is simply taking a note, in this case the 5th fret of the 3rd string, playing it, and without picking again, hammering with the 3rd finger to the 7th fret again, and you will hear that that produces a sound. Now, if I let go with my first finger when I hammer on, I can get into a position to do a vertical vibrato. Let's look at it. And played quickly. Sounds quite snappy and effective, especially if you want to get a bit of emotion into your playing. I'll do a 3-note pattern. See? I play here, and then I play this note, and hammer on and do my vertical vibrato. Now, before we close this lesson, I might recommend that you should try doing this. Let's take our 3-note pattern, do a bend with a vibrato, again, and then a bend up and down with a nice vibrato on that note, and I'm ending with a vibrato, but if you notice, I'm going through each of my 4 bends. And then finally, another vibrato there. Same one as I used here, but here. Pause a little bit, a little slide, and our octave jump, where we go from this note and slide along to our octave. And you could, of course, do 3 notes in a pattern, hit this note again, and the vertical vibrato, just for practice.